Volume 6 C8. Queen Kalka listened to the words of the Duke who knelt before the throne. "Say that again," she whispered the order as soon as he finished speaking. "The Queen of Frost, first Queen of the Kingdom of Demalbion, ruler of all the tribes of the Abelian Hills, demands the immediate beheading of Remedios Custodio of the Roble Holy Kingdom as punishment for the execution of the peaceful trade envoy. If this demand is not met, she promises to come over the wall and claim the head herself." "Who the hell is this Queen of Frost?" Queen Kalka gasped out the question with a rising pitch. "She is a dragonid, once a human," Astrako explained, while keeping his head bowed before the royal throne, and swallowed hard. "After I was captured from my estate and taken east, I met her. She was named Nabaraha and said that when she was still human she was referred to as the Huntress of the Wilds." That had the attention of Kalka, Kellett, and Gustav all at once. They stiffened as if they had all been turned to stone. Gustav's armor clinked once and then made not a sound. "She's alive," Gustav whispered. "My queen," Kellett said, brushing back her long brown hair and glancing down at the seated royal in her vibrant white and blue gown. "This could be a trick." "A trick? You can't be serious." "I was there. I saw what happened. A dragon took her away, and went into the Abelian Hills. It only makes sense that the creature did something and—" Gustav clenched a fist. "This is the result." Kalka remained quiet. Pensive. Her face was flint. She looked at neither Gustav nor at Kellett, only down at the kneeling southern nobleman. "How?" the queen finally asked. "Did she come to be queen?" "Understand, I was only a captive, taken with the intent that I gain knowledge and convey her words to you as someone that would be heeded," Astraka said, adapting and improving upon the lie the Frost Queen suggested to him. "But I did hear that she used her fame among the orcs as her foundation, and then expanded from there. She brought her knowledge of our home with her when she went east, and that was enough to let her make a new kingdom." "You admire her, don't you?" Queen Kalka demanded. Her advisors gasped at the suggestion. Duke Astraka didn't deny it. "I am from a warrior line. I admire those who win when they have no business even living." Gustav gave a reluctant grunt of acknowledgement, though his fists behind his back tensed enough to make his burnished steel armor clink a little, and the noise of his leather gloves tensing was impossible not to notice. "My queen. She's my sister," Kellett said, her eyes blinking. "If what he says is so, you know it is. Even if we knew nothing else about what happened, you know it is." Queen Kalka said and turned her head to glare up at the woman. "Your sister has cost us again, badly. What am I supposed to do? Go to war for her after she executes the peaceful trade envoy of a sovereign nation?" But Kellett began, and Kalka balled up a fist and slammed it down on the armrest of the throne. "Be silent." The hardened queen's beautiful face was rendered more beautiful in her anger. Her lips tightened, eyes flashed with fury. "You thought nothing of ignoring the plea from the mad-eyed archer, a member of the Nine Colors, for his daughter's life, and now the one you were so quick to suggest be left to die, has an army at our gates, or nearly. And you want me to spare your sister for yet another violation of customs? We stuck her out there so she could do nothing else to make things worse, and now she's got us on the brink of war." Kalka roared the words with anger she didn't know herself capable of. The months and months of trouble, corruption, destruction, the evacuation and reclamation of her capital, and realizing how much was the fault of her own naive belief that others held the same ideals she did. Kalka closed her eyes and took a long, slow breath, forcing herself to calm down, and looked away from Kellett. The toll it all took on her soul was almost beyond measure, and yet she could not stop now. "Obviously we can't go handing over our citizens' lives at the demand of a foreign power, even if it risks war. But if Remedios did do this, and she did, I don't doubt it, we have to take some kind of action. If we don't, even if they were demi-humans, we don't want the reputation of killing off envoys left and right. No nation will be comfortable dealing with us then, and who knows how that will hurt trade." Kalka asked the rhetorical question, and though Gustav relaxed, Kellett did not. Not fully. "My queen, what do you suggest?" Kellett asked, barely restraining herself from panicked breathing. "We send an envoy over the wall, someone the Queen of Frost won't kill. By time, offer to have Remedios whipped on the wall or something. Something that will satisfy diplomacy without leading us to war, and that will leave her with her life." Queen Kalka's face tensed further. "I don't like this." "No more than you do," Kalka said and reached out to take Keled Custodio's hand. But how many more have to die? My queen, what about your beliefs? Your dream? A kingdom where nobody will be sad or cry. Keled whispered the words like they were to a dying relative. You know the answer to that, Kalka said, her head hanging as if in mourning. Maybe it died before it was born, and I was clinging to a corpse with all of you humoring me. Maybe it died on the wall when we tried to execute a hero for the crime of mercy. Maybe it died when my kingdom became so rife with corruption that my city drove me from its walls. Whatever the hour of its death, it is dead. I have to do the best I can with the kingdom I live in, not the one I wish I had. She raised her head and faced the kneeling duke. Return to the southern Holy Kingdom, take my brother with you. If this fails, I want to ensure he is safe. My queen. Duke Astraka said and rose to his feet. He began to back away, fully ignored now that his business was done and the queen turned her attention elsewhere. Gustav, you will go beyond the wall as my envoy to the Queen of Frost. Plead for peace, make the offer to her in person, perhaps she will not kill you at least. The queen suggested. I was the judge at her trial, it seems more likely she would kill me than not. He frowned and bit his tongue. No, I'll go. I can think of no one better for this than myself. I will pack my things and leave at once. And if I perish, I perish, he said, and privately thought, and it will be no less than what I deserve for my part in what happened. Not stopping that sham of a trial will be a regret that will not let go, not till I'm gone from this world. If she kills me, that is just the gods rewarding me for my cowardice. He gave a slow nod of resolve and smacked his fist against his armored chest. Wish me well, my queen, he said. Come back safe, Gustav. That is an order. The queen said, and he could not keep back a smile from her. Even if her own was tiny and forced, she remained a golden and radiant beauty that naturally drew out his every protective wish. I will do my best, my queen, he replied and lowered his salute. As will we all, Kellet added with an anxious swallow. So will we all, the queen added, and watched the paladin commander's back as he left them alone. Volume 6 C9. Skarna threw back the wooden mug and drained the brew to the last drop. About now, Ilyana has probably racked up a few hundred dead at least, if I'm to judge by the size of those escorts leaving town. Damn dead fools. Almost as dumb as the ones who go flailing about the woods looking for her and her people. Skarna ran a hand over the smooth green silk shirt and over her long black pants. Her disguise varied from place to place. A mistress to a wealthy merchant, wearing slightly lewd attire, a novice merchant in her own right, or a wife or daughter to some far-off nobleman in a distant part of the southern Holy Kingdom. It changed every time, and her clothing with it, from the nubile exotic to the demure and ladylike modesty. But the story was always structured the same way. It was such a terrible thing to see so many southerners cut down, and what did the queen do? She was careful to always just ask open-ended questions, letting the listeners fill the answers in themselves. Their outrage, coupled with the drinks she plied them with, it always sparked lively talk. Scum. If they had one ounce of real loyalty to them, or even gave a damn about finding out whether or not any of what I said was true, they'd not fall so easily towards rebellion. Pathetic fools. The addiction to anger made them seek out reinforcement to confirm it, from each other, or from the memory of imagined slights that were nowhere near as great as they imagined them to be when they needed something to feed their hunger for righteous wrath. 1 ounce of decency. Skarna thought as she slid the mug over the bar to the bartender, a skinny old man with an indifferent look and a practiced hand. He caught it without looking and tossed it into a barrel full of water at his back. It landed with a splash before Skarna was gone. The woods were easy to find both night and day, and leaving the town without being seen was almost as easy as finding the woods. The auburn-haired girl's bright green eyes caught the light of the moon and glowed like the eyes of a cat. A little Cheshire smile swept over her face. I love my job. Skarna thought with a silent titter of breath in the cool night air. The demoness instruction had worked wonders in their months of time together. From the tumbling and forms, to the occasional fencing with the doppelgangers, Skarna's always lean dancer frame was now tight as a drawn bow, and her skills with a sword, once little more than for showy dancing to entice the hungers of strong men, were now sharper than real swords themselves. She jumped as soon as the guard on the low stone wall passed out of view, Her body easily cleared the 15 feet of stone and she landed quiet as a cat's paws on the other side. Normally her departures from various locations would be to bring Ileana word of some prize ready to leave a town or village, but on this occasion, Mistress will be summoning us back. It left a thrill in Skarna's gut that made her every step lighter as she loped over the open ground, silent but aware, until she reached the woods. The road went around by many miles. Of course, here was the dangerous part. She began to whistle and hold her hands up as much as she was able, tangled amidst the trees and bushes in the shadows. The night, even given a deeper shadow by the canopy of green overhead, posed no real obstacle to the now experienced agent of the demoness, but the deep growth that served as the shield of the elves was quite effective at slowing Skarna down. She whistled the signal tune until she heard someone whistle back. "Bold of you to whistle back," she called out into the dark. Ileana came into view from on top of a high branch, her feet shoulder-width apart, a bow slung on her back and her golden hair flitting lightly in the breeze. She rested one hand on the trunk of the tree from which the branch grew and smiled down at her from a stone's throw away. "You'd know, my friend, you'd know." Ileana gave a mirthful smile down at the first, and thus far the only good human that she knew, and hopped down from branch to branch when the mirthful smile was returned to her. The former prostitute crossed the distance between them, her feet crushing the soft grass and crunching the fallen leaves under her high-booted feet, and embraced her comrade tightly breast to breast. Where Skarna smelled of fermented beer and hot stew, Ileana smelled of grass and autumn breezes. The elf woman kissed her comrade's cheeks in contented greeting, and then they stepped away from one another, if only by a forearm's length, and clasped their hands together at waist height between one another. "I take it my information helped?" Skarna asked with an arched eyebrow. "Very much so," Ileana said with a sharp, affirming nod. "Come see." She turned and held Skarna's hand while leading the woman through the trees toward the deepest part of the elven encampment. Other elves, some towering hulks, others even more slender than Ileana herself, gave begrudging, welcome nods to the human visitor. There were no more narrowed looks in her direction, at least, though Skarna still did her best to give warm smiles and waves to one and all. She did, however, hold Ileana's hand a little tighter, which brought a squeeze back her way. It was hard for the peasant not to be nervous still. The naked hatred of her race by the elves was a constant source of anxiety. The fate of elf women in Wenmark was something Skarna acutely understood, and more than once she wondered, will they turn on me the same way? The idea of bearing the brunt of their hatred for humanity left her trembling more than once when giving out information. Her very existence, only barely tolerated. It still made her swallow hard, even if she was tolerated, and trusted, if not loved by those Skarna sought to help. It left the human woman all the more in awe of Ileana's resilience and strength. "Here we are," Ileana said offhandedly, oblivious to the admiring look the human woman gave to her back. She swept aside a curtain of leaves sewn into thick dark cloth to reveal a composite cage made out of metal, with heavy wooden logs secured to chains which were in turn bound to the wrists of human men, women, and children. "We made a quick raid on Wenmark and recovered some of the iron jewelry that they used to decorate us with," Ileana said with a cheery voice while her and Skarna's eyes swept over the dozens of humans in fraying and dirtied fine clothing. "I'm not sure they appreciate the irony. But even so?" She tittered a bit and let go of Skarna's hand, and instead pulled the slender auburn-haired human toward her at the hip, a tight little embrace that was a little tighter than it needed to be. How many were you able to get?" Skarna asked without looking at the smiling elf. Instead she looked at the human captives, minor nobles and merchant guild members caught on the road, lured out by one of Skarna's stories or whose travels Skarna had learned of in advance and alerted the elves to. "Almost all of them," Ileana acknowledged. "One or two broke free and we had to kill them, but otherwise?" She laughed a rich, silvery laugh. "Everybody you warned us about. When the time comes and we reveal that these are still alive, we should have no trouble negotiating with the South for our way out of this hellhole." The humans in the cages looked at Skarna at first with pity, thinking her a captive, but as they heard the conversation, their faces all turned to anger. Children, young ones as small as 4 or 5, clung to their parents and cried. Older adults shook their chains and shouted at her, "Traitor! Traitor! Traitor! You'll be hanged for this!" Drawn and quartered. Flayed alive. Burned. Torn limb from limb. The promises of her dire fate rained down on Skarna, and Ileana held her a little tighter. "Can we go and talk elsewhere?" Skarna asked, doing her best to ignore the dirty faces and twisted anger of those trapped in the crude iron cage. Of course, Ileana said, and dropped the curtain back so that it cut off the human's view of her again. This way, she said, and led Skarna away and over to a large tree around which a high wall of sticks was jammed into the earth and then secured by dried vines, set to offer some degree of privacy. There was no gate. Ileana simply let go, and jumped over to land on the other side. Skarna followed, and there she saw a bed of woven grass over which lay the fur of a slain brown bear, which Ileana promptly lay down on after tossing her bow onto a nearby hook hammered into the tree. The elfin woman crossed her ankles and put her hands beneath her head, then turned slightly to face her companion. "Okay, we can talk. What's going on? Is something wrong?" Ileana asked, and Skarna sat down cross-legged beside her. "Yes, I guess. Do you? Do you hate humans? Still, I mean?" Skarna asked. Ileana's eyes widened a little. "Of course I do." "Me?" Skarna asked and closed her lips tight. "No. You're all right on my scrolls," Ileana answered. "There probably aren't 10 good humans in the world at any given time. I'm lucky enough that I finally met one who cared enough to help me. I doubt I'll ever meet another." Skarna searched for words to say while Ileana reached out, plucked a blade of dying grass from the soil and put the upper end of it in her mouth to chew. "I'm not going to hurt you, Skarna. If that's what you're worried about. I hate your race. I can't help myself. Even if I could stop hating humans, do you know how many human men, and even women, have hurt me over the years? Even if I got rid of my hatred, all that would leave me with is fear. Would you rather I have that instead? That's all I've got, hatred or fear. That's all any of us have had for longer than your lifetime." Skarna hung her head. "I'm sorry for what my people did to you. I have no right to tell you how you should think or what you should feel. It's just, I care about you a lot. It stings to think that when you look at me." Ileana sat upright at the waist before the sentence could be completed, and put a finger over Skarna's lips. It was enough to stop the peasant from speaking. The light pressure might as well have been a steel bear trap, holding her mouth closed as it did. "It's for the best if you don't finish that sentence, Skarna. I'm an elf whore. Nothing good ever comes of a human getting involved with me beyond business. I like you too, a lot more than I thought. You put yourself out for me and I see how some of my people look at you. It can't have been easy, I know. I was on the other end of that among your race. For you to stick with us, help us, risk getting caught. You're bold, and I'm proud to be at your side. To call you friend. But that's all." Skarna flushed red in the face until Ileana's finger came away, and she forced a laugh, throwing back her head and leaning back with her palms flat on the dying grass blades. "Did you think I was making a love confession? Oh no, no. I understand, it's just, I wanted to confirm that you and I were okay. I saw how you looked at those human prisoners, and..." "Oh, of course." Ileana interjected with a laugh of her own. "What was I thinking? Well, pardon me while I blush at my misunderstanding." Which she did, and then patted Skarna on the side of her knee. "Yes, we're just fine. The things I feel about humans are very generalized. I don't have any ill feelings toward you. So, now that's out of the way, just for safety. Just in case, why don't you lie down here with me while we wait for Lady Albedo to summon us? A little sleep before the gate opens would be great." "Right, I'm safe with you," Skarna answered and lay down while Ileana did the same. They snuggled up close, scooting in to press and share the warmth of their bodies with one another, and quietly drifted off to sleep. Or pretended to at least. Volume 6 C10. Ainz allowed Albedo to lose herself in the moment for far longer than he knew he should have. And yet? The time to think was so vital that it couldn't be helped. What have I done? What have I done to my precious Albedo? How could I have not understood what I was doing to her while I was trying to ease myself into things? I should have told her first, whatever the consequences for it. His heart tore with the ease of wet paper and with the pain of sensitive, intimate flesh under rending claws. "Albedo," he finally said, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." His voice, muffled by the mask, might have disguised the change from undead to human. But it did nothing to disguise the sense of remorse which came through with every word. His hands ran over and over through her dark silk hair and down her upper back. Albedo being on her knees did nothing to stop their shaking, But when her lord spoke, she managed at least to raise her head and shake that back and forth in turn. No, no, my lord. My lord's will is perfect and right. I shouldn't act this way. If it is my master's wish to withhold his love for his servant, then I have to endure it. I was created to serve you. Where you want me to be, I must be, for as long as my lord wills it. She sniffled and wiped her nose, but kept her eyes up on him and added, but I did miss you so very, very much. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Ines repeated as if she'd said nothing at all. You worked so hard for me, and I didn't know how much I was hurting you. You're the precious daughter of a dear friend. I would never want to hurt you. The simple statement that she was the daughter of his dear friend lanced through Albedo's heart, a brutal, piercing dismissal of the way she loved him, and from the core of herself that was opened up by that piercing strike, out-fountained words she had uttered 1,000 times in her own mind. No. I'm more than that, my love. So much more, she cried out. I'm not a child. I'm a woman in love. Love I want to give to you and you alone. Love you chose for me, as a woman, not as a daughter. Her words were frantic, blunt, bold, and they rained down on Ines' resolve like vicious blows, not because of what she said, but because it opened up his overwhelming sense of guilt. A memory stirred, distant now, but present nonetheless, of a powerful executive that wanted the pretty wife of a junior worker and so threw an office party. Though the man Suzuki Satoru had not personally seen what took place, the story made the rounds. A little white powder in her drink got her away from her young, naive husband and alone, and the executive had his fill of her, only to discard her when he was done. A special loathing existed in his mind for that executive, though now as Albedo's powerful hands pulled at his robes with teary eyes he was hard-pressed to distinguish himself from the one who used the employee's wife. It wasn't lost on him what happened. Divorce and 2 suicides thereafter. Ines' one excuse. I didn't know what I was doing when I changed her. It was just a final joke. Now he faced the punchline. A sobbing mess of a desperate girl who only wanted his love, and an overwhelming guilt at what he'd done to her. And all he could do was say, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. This was all my fault. All my fault. Lord Ines. Please. Please. Just a little bit of your love, even if for just a little while. She began to pull at the fabric of his robes, and the moment changed. She wasn't pulling herself to them, or them to her, or even himself to her, rather she was drawing herself up to pull his robes away to expose his body. Albedo, Ines exclaimed with a heart now pounding with shock and fear as much as guilt, get hold of yourself. Her pheromones filled his senses, the dreams of twilight hours came to mind to mingle with his panic, his alarm, his dismay, his guilt. He grabbed her wrists, though she was a level 100 warrior which his former build could never have taken in a struggle. Now, having far surpassed his old limits, he gripped her wrist and held her fast. He stopped her cold, though his aroused manhood still gave in to her wiles, he could still easily overpower her. This is because of you. Your will, isn't it, my love? She cried out with an agonized catch in her voice as she lost all reason, her wild beauty and her slender frame which was by design meant to entice beyond measure. Only his doubt about how she might react to his humanity kept his sense of control at bay. Albedo, my body, I have to tell you. I know, my lord. I know the truth. She shrieked the words and resumed drawing herself up. He fell on his back, more out of shock at her words than by the strength of her body. You are a man. A whole man now. I've known for months. Longer. Since before you went to the dwarves, she shouted, and he froze. Shock enveloped him. I was so careful to keep her at bay. And it was all for nothing. She knew? She knew and Ines' realization ripped apart what was left of his resolve. I tortured her for nothing. His human heart wept to see as she pulled his robes away and exposed his naked chest. She straddled him then and pulled her dress up over her head. She cast the gift of her creator into the corner of the room with the utmost contempt. The wooden floor of the expensive room might as well have been filth to her before that hour. But in this moment, Albedo considered it to be the same as sacred ground. Her breasts heaved as she tore away the sash that bound the undergarments which concealed his manhood, and with a swipe of her fingers she tore the cloth away. They were panting, both of them for different reasons. Only his mask remained. For a moment Ines thought she was going to tear it away. Her hands were slow as glacial ice to his high-level body. He could have stopped her. He had no doubt about it. What did you expect? he asked himself, and her hands found the edges of the mask of jealousy. Then they did nothing, they didn't tear it away. Ainz relaxed himself. My lord. May I? May I see? It was a question as out of the blue as a lightning bolt on a cloudless day. You can never go back, if you do, Ainz said and brought his hands up to hers. His shaft was still responding to her pheromones. Overwhelming heat rose from both their bodies. I can't bear it. I can't, she said, and in that moment of rare clarity she asked, all the others saw. Haven't they? Ainz had no will to lie to her. Yes. Am I so unworthy? Cursed? She asked, coming for a moment, back to herself, perhaps due to his own seeming lack of response to her actions. Of course. Look what I am about to do. The naked succubus hung her head in shame and then drew her hands away to cover her face as if she had a mask of her own. This was supposed to be beautiful. This was supposed to be beautiful. This was supposed to be beautiful. She choked out the words and began a soft, whimpering cry, her body still straddling his own as the depth of her crime, attacking a supreme being, settled into her head. My lord was right not to trust me. To exile me, she said, as she now came to consider her assignment. Albedo. Albedo no. 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 No, Ainz said and reached up from under her to grasp her arms and pull them away from her face to expose her weeping yellow eyes and her trembling ruby lips. Listen to me. Let me tell you, Ainz said and began to relay it all to her, the moment of the change, his concerns over the loyalty of the denizens of Nazarick. I suppose I must blame my own human heart for being so irrational. As if my friends' children would ever be anything but loyal. It was a stupid thing for me to fear, but I feared it anyway. Albedo gave a weak, fragile smile. This truly does explain much. But, your mask, may I, my love? Ainz allowed her hands there again, and this time he did not stop her from pulling it aside. My lord is handsome, she said and touched the cheek of his face, a little dark beard stubble bent under the light touch of her fingers. I knew my lord had all his manly parts restored, but not that he was human. A spike of alarm shot through Ainz's heart for a moment until he saw that her smile did not vanish, instead growing only stronger. I should have expected as much out of a genius, he admitted, and his head rolled to the side to look away from her. It seems so obvious now. I should have come to you first. But he reached up, not for her heaving breast, but for her own face. You're my friend's child. What I did so thoughtlessly, it was wrong. Your feelings, you told me once it wasn't a problem. That is true for you, but not for me. How can I do what you want when it isn't what you were meant to be? His face twisted into a mix of confusion and pain, his eyes welled up with tears. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, my Albedo. But please. Rise, put on your clothes. I can't. We can't. I can't, Ainz said a little more firmly. If she had pressed on, his resolve hung like a fraying thread. He would have relaxed, and let her do as she wanted. I'm here now. Let that be enough. Please, he urged. She gave a quiet, submissive nod and rose from off of him. His robes were not truly off of his body, only cast down. As she rose and went to obey him, putting on her dress again, he rose himself and began to close his robes as if nothing at all had happened. But it did. She had her back to him while she dressed, and shameful though it was, he could not help but look. So Albedo caught his eyes when she ran her hands through her hair, pulling it from out of the confines of her dress to tumble down her slender curving back. She lingered there a moment, sharing the eye contact from across the room, and then folded her hands demurely in front of her waist before saying, My lord, my servants should be ready soon. If it pleases you, we can begin to go over our plans for the last push before this kingdom is doomed to fall into your hands. Ah, yes. Yes, let's do that. Go ahead, Albedo, Ainz stammered for a moment as he fixed the mask back over his face and then followed her over to a waiting table with two comfortable-looking chairs just begging to be used. Volume 6 C11. An envoy from the Holy Kingdom? Naya asked the messenger, her brow furrowed and she leaned forward. Her back itched, she reached behind her to scratch the protrusions that were beginning. Just like with the horns. How much of me will be left by the end? It was a half-held thought of no real consequence to the Queen of Frost. The messenger was a Bafolk, one of the survivors after killing the Grand King Bissa. I suppose there is something to be said for the demi-human reverence for strength. Killing him solidified my reputation. They have no idea that when I was human, I was nowhere near as strong as everybody thought. She let out an exhale that cast out the fog of her breath. A cool autumn air wafted over some of her exposed skin as she contemplated what to do. Yes, my queen. And he says you know him. The Bafok knelt in the fashion of his people, with a hoof always moving and ready to jump. They were fantastic jumpers, a thing she kept in mind for when she went for the walls. His statement, however, caught her ear. I do? Did he give a name? Naya's ears pricked up. He says, Gustave Montagnier, commander of the Paladin Order. The Bafok huffed, a sign of contempt at the long title. Naya, however, shot to her feet with such force that she nearly toppled her throne. Gustave? Are they mad? She snapped. While not well known to her as a person, she knew what he used to be. And she would never forget the moment when last they saw one another. When he saw her sentenced to the sword and the stake. They are either insane, or this is an insult. Or an offering. Is that what this is? Naya wondered, could they be offering his life in exchange for Remedios Custodio? That thought made more sense than simple madness. Regardless, she had to respond. It had been some time, even knowing it would take a fair bit for Duke Astraca to deliver his message, and even more time for him to get home and start his own rebellion, so if nothing else, sending him is legitimate, one way or the other. Naya reasoned. When she'd shot to her feet, the guards lining the wall stared at her, their weapons tensed, but she shook her head. Call for Olisar Dark, it's time we make an impression on the Holy Kingdom. The Bafok rushed to obey, and Naya clenched her sharp talon-tipped fingers, clicking the ends together as she took a slow walk out of what was rapidly becoming a growing palace. The wall was nearly complete, with one marvelous design feature she insisted upon that would be the last one to be added. A magicine mechanism that would open the roof to allow Olisar Dark to join her. A home isn't a home if your friends can't come in. She reflected as she turned her eye toward the distant horizon as soon as she passed through the doors guarded by both a Spriggan and an Agena. It's still strange to think of having a dragon as a friend, for that matter, having any friends is a novelty. She mused and cracked a smile at the slow-rising sun. It was a nice feeling. Some of the chiefs of the demi-humans, she'd come to like more than she was willing to admit. They had a directness to them that made their company enjoyable. They said what they meant and meant what they said, and as long as she treated them with respect and was willing to risk herself for them, they were loyal. I can't ever go back. Naya came to understand, there was nowhere else in the world she could belong, not really. Humans would never welcome me as I am, and didn't even want me when I was one of them. What are the odds of any other monarchs ever really giving a damn about a demi-human, unless they're one themselves? She asked the question rhetorically and half snorted. The rumors carrying her way about the distant kingdom of Nazarick tickled at her brain, but it was difficult to credit those very much. Even if it were true, they were far away, and it was unlikely she would ever meet the ruler there. I have enough to think about right here, right now. Naya thought as the shadow of Olisar Dark covered her body when he passed over her and began to circle closer and closer to the ground near where she stood. Naya, he said, and then let out a rumble of amusement, or should I say, Frost Queen? He asked. Naya put a hand on his massive snout by the nostril. She stood just to the side of it, in full view of his single, giant eye. Just call me your friend, that's good enough, she said and tapped his nose, and also call me ready to go. The envoy will be at the old Outrider posting, I'm sure of it. Outrider posting? Olisar Dark asked. Naya nodded. Yes, for all our enmity, some trade has always taken place between the wall and the demi-humans, not a lot, mind you. But those scouts that were there did come out this way to find out what was going on sometimes, and they built up some good relations at least. Good enough that they have a few designated areas where they could generally rest without being immediately killed. I've never been there, but I know what to look for from word of mouth. Then let's not keep them waiting, perhaps their surrender will be brief. Olisar Dark said with such a serious voice that Naya almost took it seriously until she realized it was his way of joking. Her face split in laughter and she smacked his nose with her palm again. Oh come on, you. She quipped and rushed past his head and bounded from the ground, off of his foreleg, and up onto the back of his neck. The broad white wings of the frost dragon battered the air, causing nearby trees to sway, rock and threaten to come up by the roots before the dragon's rising body grew too distant. Soon they were well aloft and soaring through the air, the wings beat and tail lashed until the great dragon could simply glide ahead on the currents of the air. Naya pointed to a little cluster of trees covered with white petals native to the Abelian hills. They were long, slender things at the trunk, but burgeoned at the top like mushroom heads, broad around, and always grew in threes. The great white flowers gave off a powerful smell, and from them hung white vines of exceptional thickness, with length enough for several paces worth of length to coil on the ground. "Land there," Naya said, and Olisar Dark looked behind him to see where she pointed. "I smell nothing," he said. "Even from here, I should detect some hint of human." "You wouldn't," Naya said. "Those trees hide everything within them. Goodness knows why, but it makes a perfect hiding spot for wayward humans. Or at least a few of them," she answered, and understanding her reason, Olisar Dark began his slow corkscrew descent to the ground again until Naya dismounted with a flourishing leap. She wasted no time, stepping ahead of the dragon so that she was in his field of fire if he should use a breath weapon. "Gustave Montagna. You wanted the Frost Queen. I am here. Come out." "Silence," she called out again. "Gustave, I promise I am not here to kill you. The gods wouldn't blame me if I did. Nobody who knew what you did would hold me to blame for killing you. But I swear on the lives of my parents, I am not here for that. You wanted a meeting, you came to me. What is it you want?" Gustave rested his back against the slender brown tree trunk and rubbed his forehead. "I don't want to die," he said, his heart quivering in his breast when he heard her call out the second time. Shame swept over him as he recalled the screams of the woman out there, how easily he condemned her to an agonizing end, and that even the traditional chance was denied to her. He swallowed and rubbed the sweat out of his brown beard. "I'm not armed," he shouted from within the cluster. "I came alone to parley on behalf of Her Majesty." Silence met him. Of course she said nothing, she already knows. He realized. "Please, come sit beneath the peace trees. I promise I mean no harm," he shouted again. "This time? You mean no harm this time? I have not forgotten the last time we met, Gustave Montagna," Naya retorted. "I'm sorry," she heard him shout. And that brought her up short, her suspicion, her doubts, even the slow-burning hatred, all stilled. "I'm sorry for what I did. Please, sit with me and let me say it in person." "He won't come out?" Olisar Dark asked, bringing his head close enough to Naya to whisper to her. "The tribes also consider those sacred. They won't damage them because the flowers are so useful in alchemy. If I'm truly one of them, a truce is always honored beneath the peace trees," Naya explained with a backward glance. "I'm coming in," she shouted. "Remain seated, human." She spat the last word to make a point, and trod forward over the space between herself and the white curtain of flowery vines. Her taloned hand reached out with agonizing slowness and began to push them aside. Against all reason, her heart was pounding in her breast. "Get over yourself, he's no match for you anymore. You can handle him even if he ambushes you," Naya told herself and swallowed the lump in her throat. Her body braced for a sudden attack. Instead, there he was. He was kowtowing, on his knees, his forehead pressed to the grass and hands by his head. "I am truly sorry for what I did. The trial. The trial was a sham. A sham. I was blind, and when I could see, I was too afraid to challenge it. If you want forgiveness, forget it," Naya said and walked past him to sit at another tree, her back pressed to it, her legs crossed in front of her, and her palms sat upturned on the sides of her knees. The scent of the flowers was thick, and everything swayed back and forth lightly in the breeze, as if the trees were waving goodbye to some distant and retreating friend. Gustave got up, went to the tree closest to her, and sat in the same fashion as she. "I do want forgiveness, Naya Baraha. But I don't deserve it. For what it's worth, what I did will haunt me until I die, which," he raised an eyebrow, "I hope will not be in the next few minutes." The way he asked it was so odd that Naya laughed. A thick, rich laugh that made her slap her knee several times until she got herself under control and shook her head at his question. "No, you will not die today, Gustave Montagna. But depending on how you answer, a great many may in the weeks ahead." Her face became grave, serious, and his relief, though it swept through him like a wave, was short-lived. "Do you hate us all so much now? Would you really turn on your kingdom, your people, your parents, your home?" Gustave asked, or rather, implored, his back straight against the tree. He bowed his head, but kept his eyes roving over the dragonid queen. Her hair was as short as he recalled, but it had become an icy blue, while her skin was as pale as a corpse, but with little blue lines in spear shapes that suggested her flesh was now more like scales than skin. Her eyes were the same as he recalled, right down to the raw terror that seemed to hone in on him and command his bowels to loosen. The horns that jutted from her head thrust forward and up at a slight angle toward her forehead, and her ears had a distinct point to the ends that were absent from humans, and the lobes were gone from them. She was briefly quiet in response. But when she answered, it was slow and sonorous. No. No, I don't hate the Queen, or the Holy Kingdom, or the place of my birth. The gods know you all gave me reason enough. You sent me on a suicide mission, I gave my life to my kingdom. She hissed and smacked her hand over the green scale armor at the breast. I devoted myself to my duty. I hunted the wildlands and survived. Then I was killed for it. The gods know I have reason enough for hating you all. Not one of you gave a damn about me. Where was my relief? Where was my resupply? I don't know. Gustav muttered, and was no longer able to meet her eyes. There was never any, not for me, or for anyone. That suicide mission was there to get rid of troublesome elements in the ranks in the most efficient way possible. If you had all just listened to me, then Olis Urdark might have been happy to rule the wall and could have been the greatest security our kingdom had ever known. Instead, she jabbed her talon down at the space between them. Here we are. This isn't about hatred, Gustav, Naya emphasized. Your stupid leaders killed Teraven, one of my tribal chiefs, one of the first to submit to me. Someone whose life I personally spared. And he was a peaceful envoy. She hissed the rebuke out at the human and closed her finger back into a fist. I could love you all to death, and nothing would change about the fact of what happened to him. You killed a royal envoy, a peace expedition, you know what that means. I know it was Remedios Custodia behind it. And I'm giving you a chance to avoid war because I know the Queen wasn't the one to give the order. I want Remedios's head on that wall. Naya jabbed her arm out with her talon extended toward the direction of the divide between peoples. If it isn't, I will invade, take your wall, capture Remedios, and put her head up there myself. Naya bared her fangs at her former superior officer. Strangely enough, despite the fact that he was a fairly big man compared to her, she felt very much like she was looking down at him. The Queen, Gustav finally said, is not willing to give up her loyal, if misguided servant. She offers a personal apology to you, and to have the former Paladin commander publicly whipped atop the wall where you can see for yourself that she is punished. That gave the Frost Queen pause. But not for long. She killed an entire envoy, and you expect me to be satisfied with her continued life, and an apology after she receives the kind of pain we give to a soldier who shows up drunk to duty? Naya furrowed her brow and gave a slow shake of her head. No, Gustav. No. Naya answered. Think very carefully about this. The Northern Holy Kingdom has been decimated by demi-humans before, but it has always triumphed because the demi-humans did not work together. That has changed. I am forging a true nation out of them. I know my homeland intimately, I've been in some of the fortresses, don't think I can't or won't use that against you all to bring this to a quicker end. If I go over that wall, I won't be as destructive as the demi-humans before me. But I promise you, the Roble Holy Kingdom will never be the same again. Gustav raised his head. Meeting the narrow, vicious eyes of the dragonid before him, he mustered his courage, and said only, If